those of you who don't know me then, I'm Adrian, lead a church called Oasis, which is also in Birmingham. We kind of like each other in Birmingham. We hang out, we're not in competition. We genuinely just want to see Jesus known in the city. I'm kind of jealous of the view they have of the city here. But there we go, I have to live with that, but I'll get to look at it now. In terms of this session, what we wanted to do is look at this whole thing as church needs creators. But before we get there, I guess I wanted to just tell a little bit of a story, and others can then come back by the time we get to the end of that. I think firstly to say a massive thank you to Johnny and the team for pulling this stuff together. I think it's amazing, isn't it? I don't think these kind of moments you feel like, oh, you're going to just do a quick kind of big high five and pat each other's backs for ages. It isn't that. It's a genuine sense of God's doing something different amongst us. And I think Johnny and the rest of the team in Sputnik, which you'll get to see through this day, are doing an incredible job of developing who we are, not only as local churches, but as a family of churches as catalysts, which I'm quite excited about. I think also to kind of put this in context, which Johnny started to do, is I'm going to be a nightmare for Joel as well with the camera, I've realised, because I hop around, which I apologise, Joel, for, is the Catalyst Festival, I guess, my involvement in that was literally like this. I offered to run some fringe events at the festival, because I thought if it's going to be a festival, surely you need a bit of a fringe. And at that point, we were running a monthly live bands night in Birmingham, getting different bands from the city to it and putting on what's become a very good evening. And thought, well, what we could do is we could bus in some bands. Some of them might be believers, some of them wouldn't be, and we could do that for a couple of nights, and who knows, we could do some stuff for kids, and that's it. So I approached and offered to run some fringe stuff. At the end of that conversation, and 2 weeks later, found that I was basically doing everything that was outside the main meeting and the kids and youth. And that seemed to be a blank piece of paper that I needed to write quite quickly. And so did it. And one of the things I guess that I'd been on a journey with and had as a real sense of value for who we were as a family of churches, grabbing it from Dave Devenish, was that we understand that we're here to reveal God's kingdom in everything, in everywhere. And so the desire was therefore not to say we're going to limit what we are to what goes on within our church communities or what we've seen, which is excellent in terms of God's kingdom breaking out, in terms of signs and wonders of healing, but actually to see different signs and wonders within each area of church life. And so that's been the development of understanding that the way we use our brains in the think zone is exactly as important as how we're involved within everything of life, in our workplaces, in our families, what we do with our retirement, but also in terms of creativity. And one of Johnny and my battles at the beginning was one, to make sure the art gallery was there as people walked in straight away, because we wanted everyone to engage with something they otherwise might not do, in order they could see something they otherwise might not do. The other side was to see that the arts wasn't something to be seen on the edge as a kind of fringe activity, but was as important as people debating whether predestination is right or wrong, if that floats your bag kind of thing. And so therefore there was this fight of saying, actually, do you know what? Being great at printing and using that to reveal God's love and to show God love is as important in extending God's kingdom as debating, I'd sometimes say more important, predestination. And we kind of fought that one through. And if you like, as a family of churches, we're kind of widening, saying actually it is all of this. And Sputnik is an incredibly key part of everything Catalyst is and seeking to become, in seeing that Jesus is about revealing the wonder of his kingdom in everything of our lives. And in it, therefore, this isn't, I hope, us seeing that this is about how we relate within our local church, but how we as individuals in local churches relate together to actually cause who we can be together to actually have a greater impact. And that's my hope, our hope, I think, through this. I think in it then, a bit of my story in terms of creativity. I haven't got any stars. I looked at it and I thought, man, I have none of these, I'm still learning. And I thought there should be one that's like, could try. And I could probably put that one on. So I'm kind of blank. I have no creativity, I've discovered. But I'll come to terms with that. But in it, I tell you what, as a quick aside, there's nothing more vulnerable than speaking in front of a bunch of creative people. You think, man, am I going to be creative enough? But in terms of, yeah, we'll see. I'm going to moonwalk halfway through. for me, the journey, I guess, started around kind of 2007. I was leading Oasis Church, and I was driving literally from round the corner of this building where I was living to a meeting that I was involved in Oasis. And as I was driving there, as often is the case, I wasn't actually concentrating on my driving. I was thinking about other stuff. And the thing I was thinking about was, in this city, why am I here? God, what is it you've put me here to uniquely do that could be different in how we explore what church could be? And I felt God speak to me about two particular things. There's other things that have come along on the journey, but two particular things. One was that I was particularly wired to reach, disciple and train, and to gather and build people in their 20s and 30s. And then about 2 years later, I then discovered that Birmingham is one of the youngest cities in the whole of Europe, has 45% of its population that are 30 and under. Therefore, you think, all right, okay, God, I was kind of hearing you right, I'm in the right place then. The other side was this thing of the artistic community, the creative community, and a particular sense of, actually, God, what would it look like to reach people in the creative community? Because my observation of being what Johnny's already shared is that actually church and creativity didn't seem to always go hand in hand. And what tended to happen was that people felt either they had to conform to a mold and therefore died to something of who they were, or just felt like they were always on the edge and didn't quite fit. And what I then found is that then, at best, believers kind of found other ways to try and figure out community. At worst, that people in the end thought, I don't know how Jesus fits into who I am, and actually found themselves involved in other communities that seemed to accept them for who they were. And I just thought, it surely isn't meant to be like that. Surely there's this different way. And I guess started a journey at that point. And I would say at that moment in Oasis Church, we had probably two clear creative individuals. That was Janie and that was Andrew. And they were kind of our stars. And you can only wheel out two people every so often and say, we're commuted. we're a very creative community. Look at us. Look at our two creative people. And people in the end start to see through that and thought maybe we've got to add some more. But these guys, I guess, have been my suffering heroes along the way of me learning and sometimes damaging them through me learning, which I'm sure you'll get to hear about, as I've gleaned things from them of how could I be better at building church with others that could include people that otherwise at that point could sometimes feel excluded. And that's kind of been some of our journey, to the point now where we just have, yes, handfuls of people who are kind of really at the kind of pushing the boundaries of their craft, but we have loads of people who would say, actually, we're finding a place in terms of what it looks like to be creative and in the church. And so it often takes you by surprise. I remember having someone visit Oasis a few years ago, and they came in and they said, man, this is an incredibly creative bunch of people. And I thought, oh, is it? I hadn't noticed. But there's something that's gone along the way. And I guess as we've done it, we've learned some things. And so we'll get to look at this. Still, it'd be helpful to tell some stories. It helps win you to me. But I guess some of the big stories was, one, I've learned that dialogue, and I keep having to learn this one, is really important. To talk and to listen, and to really listen to what people need to hear and say. And it doesn't mean they're necessarily wanting something to happen. It's really important to be listened to. And I've learned within building creatives in dialogue's really important. The second thing I've learned, and this one, I would say there's so much more we could do, but it's taking everyone along the journey as you do it, and that is that you have to be willing to take risks. And I found that we've had to sometimes think, let's do this, and let's see what happens. And there's been some, Andrew and I were talking about it, and I wanted to make sure he'd be okay with me telling some of the stories. There's been some moments of us taking creative risks where you think, oh no. So I was remembering with Andrew where we decided that it'd be great within worship, and there's been a couple of kind of right throw it out of the park moments in worship, and not in a good way. And I remember this one time where Andrew talked to me and said, I'm thinking of doing this whole thing about freedom and encouraging people in freedom. And I think I've sampled this kind of William Wallace-esque kind of freedom cry at the beginning, and I think we could start worship with that. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, sure, let's go for that, let's try it. And so we did it, and I can genuinely say, I'm so glad I wasn't Andrew stood at the front. You can see everyone just like, whoa, what's going on? But it was a moment of learning something. And the next time you try something, okay, let's keep going. And people get used to the fact they're risking. I remember turning up and a younger guy who's leading worship said, yeah, I'm going to do everything in dubstep tonight. And I was thinking, I don't even know what dubstep is. And then he started songs in a rhythm and tune that I just didn't think worked. But we worshipped in dubstep, and certain people seemed to really get it. I stood there just feeling incredibly middle-aged, thinking, I don't know how this is going to work. And to be honest, it was probably a one-off dubstep worship. We've not yet repeated it. But within it, what's also happened is there's a permission to try things. Others do things. And so you suddenly find that there's these other people who then get joined in and think, man, because you're willing to risk there, let's do that. And so worship within Oasis, I always get excited about, because I know there's going to be a pushing of the creativity of how we do it. Now, it isn't the only outlet, but it is a key one when we come together. I think for us, the learning of pushing and taking risks has been through some of the content we've done. And so within our carol services, having storytelling or spoken word or poetry, or having Janie choreograph a dance that we then filmed and showed, were just incredible moments. And it's not like we're kind of doing it all the time, but it's these moments where you push something and you think, hey, now everyone's seen it, maybe one day we can return and do more of it. Or in how we communicate is, for me, as I'm preaching, is continuously thinking through how can we communicate in a broader and wider way. And so always pushing ourselves in terms of our communication, whether it's in using props, pictures, designs, the language we use, even down to when we come to look at a series, saying, actually, let's not just reveal our series through how we speak it, let's reveal our series through how we use graphics to depict it, or even within every series now, we commission Andrew to compose a piece of music that will accompany an intro video to the series. And that piece of music is to convey what we're trying to do through the whole of the series. I think that's quite hard to do personally, to say, right, you've got 60 seconds, convey this series on, I don't know, I'm trying to think, the fruits of the Spirit. That was a classic. Convey the fruits of the Spirit through music, Andrew. And so what he does is he goes away and he samples loads of different pieces of fruit being crushed, chopped, cut, and thrown. And that was the intro. It is phenomenal when you listen to it, all kind of sampled together, and you think, oh, that's fruit. And our whole series was fruit that lasts, and that fruit was lasting in music. And so we've looked to kind of push and take risks. I think probably the biggest thing and the journey we've been on that has helped in terms of building creatives around us has been to see and discover that actually who we are is really significant, and where we're placed is really significant. And the point isn't that we gather everyone in to do more and more things good within the church. The point is that we encourage more and more for everyone to get outside the church walls, to be who they're meant to be, where God has uniquely placed them, to add in his colour and flavours. And if you like, we kind of live with this mantra of saying, like, everything is an opportunity to love God, and everything is an opportunity to reveal God's love. Or everything is worship, everything is mission, or everything is about loving God, everything is loving people. And we said, actually, that's what, at the nub of everything we do, we're seeking to do in terms of creativity, saying, actually, it's all about that. And therefore, it's important that people get to discover and see that, which brings us then quickly and briefly that I've got to look at this thing in terms of what does it mean then that church needs creatives. And in this, I guess I just want to ask three questions, even not three questions. That's why, what, and how. Why does the church need creatives? What does it look like, and how do we do it? My goal is, I guess, and I'm only going to take 15 minutes because I really want to get some time to pray. And this means I've got to speed through, so I apologise for that. But the point for me of this is that each of us would leave feeling more released and more freed. That's the point, because I know if that happens, local churches are going to benefit. We as a family of churches are going to benefit. And more importantly, people outside the church who don't know yet God's love are going to come in to encounter it as each of you kind of seek to excel in your crafts and seek to be all you can be. So first of all, in terms of church needs creatives, why? I kind of say four things. The first one is this. Why I think the church needs creatives is because of the body. It's how Jesus designed it. I put bits of the Bible in so I can look legitimate. So 1 Corinthians 12:12 says this: just as a body though one has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. Paul, I believe, has this grasp of who we are as church that is unlike any others, because how he encountered Jesus in physical form was through persecuting the church. He realized that in what he did to the gathered church community is what he was doing to Jesus, because Jesus revealed himself to Paul in that way on the road to Damascus. It says, Saul, why are you persecuting me? At that moment, Saul saw, and then became Paul in believing in Jesus, that how we treat church is how we treat Jesus. And that therefore, who the church is who Jesus is on earth. We have this amazing privilege in that. But the church is therefore the body, but not any old body, it's the body of Jesus. But therefore it's a body that has different parts. And kind of Paul continuously labours this of just saying, man, we've all got one, we can all picture it. You don't have to be creative to imagine this. And the thing is, a body looks odd when limbs are missing. I don't mean that disrespectful, but it's just the body was meant to have all the different parts. And so, therefore, when we get to look at the church community, my concern is we've been missing some limbs. And for creatives to be in amongst local churches, for creatives to be in amongst who we are as a family in churches is really important, because it allows us to be truly who we're meant to be as body. Each of you here has a unique part to play in revealing Jesus' body where he's placed you. And if you're not, the body's missing out. So firstly, body. Secondly, big picture. Colossians 1:20, through him, Jesus, to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. The deal is, Jesus' big plan, God's big plan, is to reconcile everything. And for me, I can't comprehend everything. I try to, but it's just too big. It's not just humanity salvation. It isn't just about my rightness before God, your rightness before God. It's about the whole of the creative order being made right before God. So that's what you see in Revelation 21:22, is how when it all gets back together, it's all there. It isn't we're kind of dismembered bodies kind of floating in clouds. No, then we're physically present on a new earth where everything's renewed. And therefore part of our remit in this moment is to be part of reconciling everything back to God. It isn't something we wait for Jesus to return to do, it's something we're involved in now. And therefore, as creative, there's environments and places that you can be in that are about reconciling things back to God and making the whole that I cannot. There's paintings, there's music, there's writing to be done that allows people to see something that otherwise isn't being seen at the moment. To be honest, I'm getting bored of exhibitions in this city. We had the privilege of meeting at the MAC for 2 years, which is the art centre of Birmingham. We're the only religious group ever to be allowed consistently to meet there. Don't know why, they just seem to like us. We met there. I tell you what they love to do is do things that shock you. And so I remember I've been to 2 exhibitions that have scared the wits out of me. One was where you walked into a room, it was pitch black. Like you could not see your hand in front of your face. And at the back of the room was the noise of a lift going down the deepest mine I think it is in Zimbabwe. And so it's just this noise, this chain noise. It was awful. And so you walk into this room, and what it does is it just brings all your senses overload. The guy who was at the door, who was meant to show you around, said, "I'm too scared to go in there." I thought, well, that's good, isn't it? So I go in with Gus, who I work with, who's Janie's husband. And I know that basically when we go in this room, what's going to happen is that we're both going to split off. And I know that Gus is going to hide and he's going to crawl along the floor and jump out at me at some point. But the thing is, I walk in and I'm in pitch black. And at the best of times, I get disorientated. Even in daylight, I get disorientated. So pitch black, I'm a nightmare. I'm just like thinking, I don't even know where the door is. I just start walking around thinking, I can feel his presence. I don't know who designed this exhibition, but I tell you what, all it's doing in me is creating fear and desperation. And maybe that was the point. And sure enough, After 5 minutes, I feel this grab on my ankle and I scream like a girl and run out, whilst hitting walls along the way, finding the door. Next exhibition, Lucy's my wife. We think, right, we've got a night, we really want to go to an exhibition. It's 8 o'clock, the only place open in Birmingham, because we're not London. We haven't got the same funding, different issue. Is the Mac. So I go along to Mac, no people there. So what's the exhibition? It's really funny. The girl there goes, oh yeah, it is. Just to warn you, and I always think when they warn you think, oh no. So just to warn you, if you get a little bit, it'll smell of oil. That's the first thing. Because there's a huge vat of oil, which was the size of this room, in the centre of the exhibition. And the lights are quite dim. So don't step in the oil, and it's really smelly. And he said, if you get to a point and you think, oh, this isn't that nice, there's a little room that's lit up on the right that you could just go in and it'll be okay. So Lucy and I think, oh, great, we'll go and do that. So we walk in, and as we walk in the room, we realise that there's handprints scraped across all of the white walls covered in oil. And then at the end, above the oil, is this enormous metal statue of a man being tortured. At that point, we're thinking, God, this isn't very nice. Let's go to the room. So we turn off, and there's this little room, self-made room that's been made. And as I walk in, I look and see that it's 5 different mannequins, all in different torture positions. I turn to Lucy and say, I don't think we should go in here. And she says, why not? I said, believe me, you don't want to go in there. So we leave there. We go out of the exhibition, and I see the girl who's running out. I say, oh man, that is scary. And she said, oh, I know it's scary. I really don't like going in there. That's why I didn't want to go. I thought, why didn't you tell her? Then this family come up with their little kids. And they say, is it all right for us to go in? She said, sometimes people feel it's a bit scary and there's a big vat of oil. Watch it. Lucy and I at that point step in and say, don't, whatever you do, take your kids in there. They're not going to sleep for a week. Somewhere along the line, there seems to be this thing that to be creative and artistic means that you have to produce fear and hopelessness and despair. Someone needs to tell a different story. And I wonder whether those someones are people like you. And the church needs you, because I can't do it. I can go in there and warn parents, don't take your kids in there. But I need someone else to show something where I can say, hey, why don't you take your kids to that? There's a bigger picture to be shown. Next one, a voice. Whether you like this or not, one of the things I've come to realize is that people who are creative have a prophetic voice. Often what you're involved in, what you see, is something that is to be expressed to the rest of the church body that allows them to see this thing is about that thing of God. And sometimes that can be to point out the negatives in culture, say, oh, this thing that people are going for there is actually because they're about this greater that is revealed in God, but they just don't know it. And sometimes it's just to push creativity to say, oh, this that you see is about a that of God. But if you were to just write and draw something or write or play something that is just exactly about the that of God, people aren't going to look at it because they'll be switched off thinking, oh, it's just all about God. And I'm not interested in that. But when you do this thing over here that's pointing to God, people more engage with it. And there's such an important valuing of the voice you have that is prophetic, that allows us to see this is within culture, the this is that you can draw that produce the that we see in God. So this is about that. Last thing in terms of why is jars of clay. 2 Corinthians 4:7, Paul writes this, but you have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. Here's the deal, just because this is being filmed and therefore there'll be some theologian and maybe someone here who will kind of question me and say, I know this is about our life in Jesus. I know this is all about the fact that we've centered our lives in Jesus and therefore his life is in us and we have it in this jar of clay, which is our humanity. And sometimes we chime and sound good and sometimes I make rough decisions and I kind of make a clunk sound and it doesn't sound as good, but the treasure's still there. That's true. I also believe that there's a different element to this that's to do with creatives in the church. And this is something I feel God's spoken to me about, is that I think that creatives within the church are true treasure in a jar. And a treasure that's to be enjoyed, but because it's in jars of clay, has to be handled carefully. And the deal is, it just sometimes hasn't been. I know I haven't sometimes handled people understanding how fragile they were, just seeing the treasure and wanting that. And what happens is people get damaged and people get hurt. And I tell you, one of the big things I've learned to do is just to say sorry. The church needs creatives because you have such treasure. And I'm really sorry where we've got it wrong. And I felt it's really important to say that. For some of you here, I know I'm not the person who did it. For some of you, I probably am. But for some of you here, I'm not. But in it, I just felt it was important for me to stand as kind of church leader, as someone within Catalyst, and say, I'm sorry where we got it wrong, because we shouldn't have done. And people got broken and hurt, and you got broken and hurt because of it. But please don't let us give up. Please let's journey together. Please let's forgive and trust again and say maybe we could make something way more beautiful as we learn to live together in this. That's the why. I'm going to scoot to what and how. In terms of what then, I'd say firstly, what it looks like in terms of creatives in church and church needing creatives is it just means being. Simply being in a community is enough. I remember when Rod, who was playing one of the drum boxes, this morning came along to Oasis. I remember talking to him and him kind of saying, but Adrian, I'm not really doing that much within Oasis. I said, oh, you are. Just being here is enough. It enriches who we are. It causes us to suddenly add another colour and flavour into who we are that wasn't there before you were here. For some of you, just to know, just being in the communities you're in, just being in Catalyst makes it better. So firstly, it's about being. Secondly, it's about engaging. That it is enough just to be, but sometimes there's also a need to engage, to say, actually, there's something I can bring into this. And I'd honestly say that every single one of you has something to offer, both us as a family of churches as Catalyst and the local church that you're part of. You have something to offer. Now in it, be honest of how much you can do. See, what all of you can offer is to turn up. Now be honest as to how frequently you can do that, because I know within creatives it will be different. For some of you think, man, I can just be there all the time. For others of you, you just know because of the craft you're involved in, it just means that you cannot be as regular as other people. Your heart's in, but you just can't be around. But just be honest with that. Honest with other people. I'm in, but it's going to look like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit to be around. I've got people within Oasis who commit to be around once a month, once every other month. I've got one guy who's not creative, but he's, well, he is creative in one sense. He's a business guy who works within oil rigs. He attends Oasis once to twice a year because the rest of the time he's in the North Sea on various platforms. Is his commitment to Oasis less than someone who's there every week? No. It's just the working out of where God's uniquely placed him and how he stays connected. The work's more for us to make sure he does stay connected. So be honest about what it looks like to engage, but do engage. Each of you have unique things to bring. That would be both through in terms of your actions. Having Janie around is an unbelievable treasure within Oasis. Like, she's able to offer so much to who we are as a community, not just because of her creativity, like we'll talk about this, but in terms of her ability to lead, her ability to start things, her ability to welcome. She's probably the best, most hospitable person there is within the whole of Oasis. Like, if you ever want food, you just go and speak to Janie and you'll have food by the end of the day. She's just incredible in that. That she is also incredibly creative, which means that when we get to moments where we want to make a room look different, we go to Janie. Why? Because she has got a background in theatre design. You know, why am I going to someone who kind of made their, like, a picture hang well on their wall at home when I've got someone who painted and looked at whole sets? I think that's a bit of a score, isn't it? But she's also creative in terms of her dancing career and how she's able to add in that to who we are. And so she adds in the wonder of who we are through actively doing things. I've got other people who add in through their ideas. So I've got a guy who's recently coming around Oasis, and we met up and we were talking about our carol service. Our carol service was all along the theme of pause for Christmas. That was the point, pause. And here we were exploring what pause looks like. And this guy is pretty creative. He just came to me and said, like, I loved all the things you were doing. And we pushed some of the content. Why have you done that? What have you done there? And he said, the only thing I've got is you weren't ever silent. You kind of kept talking about a pause that was to come, that pause that people could do rather than the pause that they could enjoy there. And I said, to be honest, and this was honest, I don't think we felt we could risk being silent. That was the truth. I tell you what, I felt so provoked by this time, this conversation, thinking, man, we need to risk it more. Because him just coming, just adding in his idea was enough, engaging. Next one, involve others in your journey. I remember early on a guy called John, who's part of us, who's a, I can never remember what, it's digital media, I think that's what he calls himself now, run one of the biggest companies in the whole of Birmingham now that deal with this, incredibly vibrant in creativity and respected within his field. The thing is, as the journey started for him, we kind of knew him as him and his mate starting this business in one room. And then as every so often I talked to him, how are things going? And he'd talk about this next bit of business he'd got, the next bit of BBC that he was about to renovate for them, or how he'd just been asked. And there was this one point where he said, oh yeah, Birmingham Council have just asked if I'd represent them at I can never get this right, is it South by Southwest? And as soon as I said North, I'm sure it was South by Southwest conference in the US. I was like, given that I didn't even know what it was, I said, names. I said, well, what's that? And he said, oh, it's this. It's where people go to share what's the current future technology coming and what are the ideas to come. And I was like, man, you're being asked by Birmingham to represent them there. I said, we need to know this. For him, he was like, why you know, I don't want to make a big thing of this. I said, no, we want to be part of this journey because your story is our story. So we've had to learn this. And for you, you need to allow other people in because your story is our story. So don't be afraid to tell it. Also, it's important to be involved, not only in sharing stories, but also in asking for support. The point isn't to just be alone. It's also to say, actually, would you come along and support me on this journey? Because sometimes it can feel vulnerable. Sometimes it can come alone. I know in talking to Andrew sometimes, the piece of work that he gets invited to be part of can stimulate incredible conversations of how do you navigate this? You know, recent piece of work he was asked to be involved in, was involving bestiality, something that I'd never heard of, which I had to look up online. Whenever you need to look up something online, you have to always tell other people you're doing it, because otherwise it looks well sus in your history. Found out it was all about getting turned on by rubbing yourself up against other strangers. I thought, man, I didn't even know that existed. But there's these things, and Andrew's been asked to go in, and then knowing he's a believer and saying, okay, how do you navigate this? I love those conversations. I didn't know he asked Johnny. I love Johnny's advice. Johnny just went, emailed back and said, I think this is one for Adrian. Thought, great. But we need to navigate together, not alone. Because then it brings an understanding when we find ourselves in arenas that we never thought believers could be in. Next one, expanding. I touched on this already, but I think what it looks like in your involvement is just it expands people's understanding of who the church is and what it's meant to do in this world. Continually reminds us that it's not about what goes on within the community, it's always what's going on outside of the community and how we're involved in that restoration project of everything. And it provokes someone, so the individual who's involved in their day-to-day job in an office suddenly realize that actually I'm uniquely placed there, just as you're uniquely placed there, in order that I'd see God's restoration plan worked out there as you are there. So you're able to expand who we are as local church. Some of you think, man, you have such an important part. The what, the how then, just quickly to round up. I'd say how, choose to share. Simple as, choose to share. That means for some of us we have to choose to forgive and then choose to trust. But choose to share what you've got, to allow people in on your journey. To share of yourself. And the thing is, whenever you share of yourself, it's incredibly vulnerable. Whenever I talk with any conversation, I always want to share something of myself because I think, actually, I want to be as open as I possibly can. I don't want it to be that there's some kind of closed area, there's some kind of no-go areas. I want to share of myself, because as I share of myself, I hope it will cause others to trust me, that they then can share of themselves. Share of yourself. Secondly, I'd say it's dialogue. Talk. Talk and be robust in talking. I have to be provoked and reminded about this, to make sure I'm making enough time to talk to people, to listen. And in it, I think, is having robust conversations, and those only happen over time. If you go in and immediately say to someone, we need to do this, and you've never talked to them before, they think, all right, okay, so immediately I'm being told I've done something wrong. Actually, you say, this is, if you start off the conversation with, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm passionate about, and this is what I want for this, it's a totally different platform on which to build on. For some of you, you're kind of saying, well, I don't know how it kind of will continue to look within the local church I'm in. And to be honest, as I was doing all this, I thought there's this other session that needs to be done, which is to church leaders, and saying, church leaders, you need creatives. And if I can be of any help to any church leader, then please send them my way. I've got no problem in talking to anyone and talking about some of my journey, talking and helping them see how they can value the treasure they have in you. And so if that could be of any help, please do use and abuse me. Last thing, be patient. Just be patient. We will never go as fast as you want us to, because we want to try and take everyone with us. But we need you to keep pushing us to go further. And so even with Catalyst, even with what's going on in the art exhibition and the way we keep pushing that, the fact that we're going to take the exhibition on the road this year, which is incredibly exciting, sometimes there's a patience of saying, actually, we want to keep pushing the quality and the height of it, but we also want to take everyone with us to understand what we're trying to do on the journey. And it just takes some people longer to get there. So you just have to be patient. Don't take it personally, it really isn't. And in your community, sometimes you'll be involved in things and thinking, why don't they understand this? Why don't they value it? Because they just don't see it yet. But they will do. Because I tell you what, things are seen vastly different to what they were 3 to 4 years ago. And therefore that excites me, and I think, man, what will it look like in 3 to 4 years' time? This gathering would have never happened 2 years ago. That's what excites me. I think this wouldn't have happened 2 years ago, and here we are. What would it look like in 2 years' time? Because growth always starts small in the kingdom of God, and then it's exponential. Tiny beginning, exponential. And therefore I look at them, what's the potential of what could happen out of this? Be patient. Church needs creatives. For me, my desire, our desire for each of you, is just that you'd know a renewed sense of release. A release just to add in who you are. Not a scaled down, more palatable version. Just who you are. Because we need it. And a freedom to say, don't live with the baggage of the past. Because it will only ever hold you back and slow you down. But rather, maybe this day is a day where you say, do you know what? I'm not going to carry that anymore. I'm just going to let it go. I'm not going to allow that person's thoughts or my preconceptions of what they were thinking about me, or the actual words they used, to shape me anymore. Because actually I've got this new way of thinking. And that is that Jesus has called and gifted you in what he's called and gifted you in. And he wants to directly involve you in the reconciliation of everything. Which is quite exciting, isn't it? Could we therefore finish? The problem you've got with me, right, I know it's 1 o'clock, and so I've kind of done what I was meant to, is I also don't really eat. I eat erratically, so I kind of never have breakfast, sometimes occasionally have lunch, and then generally binge in the evening, hence why I got that. So in this point, I know we probably are hungry, but I just thought it'd be great just to pray again. And just felt it would be good to pray for that sense of freedom for some of us. And for some of us, we're just going to make a decision. Do you know what? I'm not going to carry this anymore. That's hard to do. Jesus told this amazing story about forgiveness. He told this story that's really provoking. He talked about the unmerciful servant. And he talks about this unmerciful servant who basically is forgiven a massive debt, and then immediately goes to someone else and says, oh, but you still owe me. You owe me. And throws that person in prison. And what happens at the end of the story is the original creditor comes into the picture and says, what were you doing? I forgave you all this, and then you've not let this person off. And it ends up with that individual who had been let off imprisoned. There's so many different things we can look at it and look at that story, directions we can look at it. And the direction I want us to look at this moment is when we don't forgive, when we hold on to something, in the end, what it causes and the person it damages most is us. We're the ones who just end up imprisoned by our unforgiveness, our bitterness. It's not belittling what was done for you. It's not belittling the fact that there was a debt that should have not happened. But man, we've been forgiven so much from Jesus. Let's not now live in a limitation of the life that he's got for us just because of what a mere human did to us. And even in that, I think I can be provocative. I know some of you think, you don't understand what they did. I believe people can be horrible. I believe I've been horrible. I believe that people have been horrible to me. But I tell you what, I don't want to live imprisoned by that. I want to live free of who I'm meant to be. And for some of us today, it's just saying, do you know what? No more prison cell for me. I'm just going to walk out. I'm going to live in this place. So can we stand?